Known for her warm smile and hopeful spirit,
She goes in search of real-life horror.
Brianna Ghey was a beacon of joy for those around her.
She found herself mixing with probably the one person that really had the capacity to hurt her.
She seemed to live a very happy life until sudden tragedy struck. One chilly February night, her life ended in a shocking act of violence that stunned her community and the entire nation. But Brianna's story was not just about a tragic end, but also about a fight for justice and recognition.
With a plan to murder.
To have a case literally in black and white from start to finish, that is quite unusual.
How exactly was she killed, and why did her death start a nationwide revolution? Brianna Ghey was born on November 27, 2005 in Warrington, Cheshire, a town in the northwest of England. Brianna's family was very important to her, and they cared for her deeply. Brianna was the second child in her family, and she had an older brother. Her parents loved both their children very much and always tried to make their home a happy place. From a young age, Brianna was a bright and lively child. She was always smiling and full of energy. She loved to play and make friends, and she was very good at it. Brianna was kind-hearted and always willing to help others. People who knew her described her as someone who was easy to talk to and who made others feel comfortable. She had a warm and friendly personality that drew people to her. As Brianna grew older, she started to feel different from other kids. When she was about 10 or 11 years old, she began to realize that she didn't feel like a boy, even though she was born as one. This was confusing for her at first, and she didn't understand why she felt this way. But as time went on, she started to understand that she was actually a girl. This was a big moment in her life because it helped her understand who she really was. Around the age of 12 or 13, Brianna began to tell her family about how she felt. She told them that she was a girl, not a boy. This was a very important step for her because it meant that she was starting to live as her true self. When Brianna told her friends and brother about her feelings, they were surprised, but they loved her just the same. They told her that they would always support her, no matter what. This made Brianna feel safe and loved, and it gave her the confidence to start living more openly as a girl. Brianna's family was very supportive. They helped her with everything she needed as she began her journey as a transgender girl. They stood by her side as she started to make changes in her life. For example, Brianna started wearing clothes that made her feel more comfortable, like dresses and skirts. She also began to grow her hair longer, which made her feel more like herself. These changes were very important to Brianna because they allowed her to express who she really was. Although Brianna's family was very supportive, life was not always easy for her. School was one of the most challenging places for her. She went to Birchwood Community High School, where she had been a student for many years. While Brianna had some close friends who were very supportive, she also faced bullying from other students. Being a transgender teenager in school was difficult because not everyone understood or accepted her. Some kids were mean to her because she was different, and this made school a hard place for her to be. Even though school was tough, Brianna found comfort in her family and her friends. She also turned to social media as a way to connect with other transgender people and find a community where she felt accepted. Social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram became places where she could express herself and share her story.
Brianna was a 16-year-old girl. We know she was born a boy, but she was transgender and had been living as a girl for 2 years since she was 14. Her mum talked about her being quite a contradictory character because she was very outgoing online. She had 31,000 followers on TikTok and she was very outgoing, did a lot of videos about makeup and what she was wearing, and was very confident online.
Brianna made videos and posts where she talked about her life, her thoughts, and her experiences as a transgender girl. She found many people online who supported her and who understood what she was going through. Around the age of 14 or 15, Brianna began to think more seriously about her transition. She wanted to take steps to make her body match her identity. This meant starting medical treatments that would help her transition from male to female. Brianna and her family began to visit doctors and specialists who could guide them through this process. This was a very hopeful time for Brianna because it meant that she was getting closer to living fully as the person she knew she was. However, the process of transitioning is not easy. In the UK, there are many steps that a transgender person must go through to get the medical care they need. This can take a long time and it requires a lot of patience. Brianna and her family were determined to get through this process together. They did a lot of research and reached out to support groups that could help them. Brianna's parents were very involved in making sure that she had everything she needed to move forward with her transition. Throughout all of these challenges, Brianna showed incredible strength and determination. She was very brave and continued to be herself no matter what. Even when things were hard, she stayed positive and kept moving forward. Her courage was an inspiration to those around her. And she never gave up on being true to herself. Brianna also had many dreams for the future. She wanted to finish school and pursue a career where she could help others. She was interested in jobs like healthcare or social work because she knew how important it was to be there for people who needed help. Her own experiences as a transgender person made her want to make a difference in the world. She knew that there were many people out there who needed someone to understand and support them, just like she did. In her personal life, Brianna was a creative and artistic person. She loved fashion and enjoyed putting together different outfits. She had a unique sense of style that was all her own. She loved going shopping with her friends and finding new clothes that made her feel good about herself. Fashion was a way for Brianna to express who she was, and it was something that brought her a lot of joy. Brianna was also very passionate about music. Music was an important part of her life, and she loved listening to all kinds of songs. Whether she was feeling happy or sad, music was always there for her. She had a wide taste in music, enjoying everything from pop to alternative. She often shared her favorite songs with her friends, and music helped her feel connected to others. Brianna also had a deep love for animals. She especially loved her pets, including her dog, who was always by her side. Brianna was known for being very gentle and caring with animals. Her pets brought her a lot of happiness, and she loved spending time with them. They were a big part of her life, and they provided her with comfort and companionship. Despite how lovable she was, Brianna faced a lot of problems because of her sexuality. In the UK, there has been more talk about transgender issues over the years, but it has not always been easy for people to understand. Even though there are some conversations about transgender rights and people are becoming more aware, there are still many misunderstandings. For a young person like Brianna, this meant living in a world where she had to explain herself and sometimes defend who she was, even though she was just trying to be herself. It was very clear that Brianna was trying to live her happy life, just like any other teenager. But one fateful day, something terrible happened that would change everything. On the morning of February 11th, 2023, Brianna woke up and began her day. It was a Saturday, a day when many people like to relax or spend time with friends. Brianna decided to go out for a walk in a place called Culcheth Linear Park. This park is located in Culcheth, which is a village near Warrington. The park is a quiet and peaceful place where people go to enjoy nature, walk their dogs, or just relax. It has long paths lined with trees and open fields where people can take a break from the busy world. Brianna liked going to this park because it was a calm and peaceful place where she could think and be herself. That afternoon, as Brianna walked through the park, something terrible happened. It was a cold day, with the trees bare and the ground a bit muddy from the winter weather. The park wasn't very crowded. Only a few people were around. Brianna was walking along one of the paths when she was suddenly attacked. The details of what happened are very sad and scary. Two teenagers, a boy and a girl, who were also walking in the park, approached Brianna. For reasons that are still hard to understand, they began to hurt her. They attacked Brianna with knives, which caused her serious injuries. This attack was very sudden, and Brianna didn't have a chance to defend herself. The attack happened in a part of the park that wasn't too far from the main path, but was still a little hidden from view. The trees and bushes around the area made it harder for everyone to see what was happening. This spot, usually quiet and peaceful, became the scene of a horrible crime. After the attack, the two teenagers quickly ran away, leaving Brianna seriously hurt on the ground. The park, which had always been a safe place for Brianna, had suddenly become a place of fear and violence. Not long after the attack, a few people who were also walking in the park came across Brianna. They saw her lying on the ground, and they could tell something was very wrong. Brianna was hurt very badly, and she was struggling to breathe. The people who found her were very shocked and scared. They immediately called for help, dialing 999, the emergency number in the UK. They tried to comfort Brianna as best as they could, but they could see that she was in a lot of pain. When the emergency services arrived, they rushed to help Brianna. The paramedics did everything they could to try and save her. They worked very hard, but the injuries Brianna had were too severe. Sadly, Brianna died there in the park. The paramedics and the people who had found her were very upset. They had all hoped that she would survive, but it was too late. As the news of Brianna's death began to spread, the people in the area were shocked and saddened. Culcheth is a small community, and news like this travels fast. People could not believe that something so horrible had happened in their quiet village. Many people felt scared and worried, wondering how such a terrible thing could happen in their own backyard. Parents were especially concerned for their children, and many people started to talk about how to keep everyone safe. The police quickly arrived at the park to start their investigation. They closed off the area where Brianna had been attacked, putting up police tape and keeping people away so they could look for clues. The police wanted to find out exactly what had happened and who was responsible. They worked hard to gather evidence, talking to the people who had found Brianna, and looking around the park for anything that might help them understand what had taken place. The news of Brianna's murder spread quickly, not just in Culcheth, but also in Warrington and beyond.
I didn't know Brianna, sorry, but I feel so much love for her. And I've got friends that are like a part of the LGBTQ plus community, so it like means a lot to like support that kind of thing.
People were talking about it everywhere, at school, at work, and at home. Tired of the darknet threats and worried about criminals invading your online privacy? Say goodbye to vulnerability and hello to top-notch security with Angel VPN. With Angel VPN, protect yourself from cyber criminals and stay safe while browsing. Ensure your online activities are secure and private, away from prying eyes. Ready to safeguard your digital world? Get 30% off any plan with promo code TCRIMEYT. Visit angelvpn.com now and shield your connection from darknet dangers. It was on the news, in newspapers, and all over social media. Many people were shocked and saddened by what had happened. They couldn't understand why someone would want to hurt Brianna, a young girl who was just trying to live her life. The story touched many people's hearts, especially because Brianna was so young and had her whole life ahead of her. One of the first things the police looked for during the investigation was the murder weapon. They believed that Brianna had been attacked with a knife because of the injuries she had. They searched the area carefully, looking for anything that might have been used in the attack. After some time, they found a knife not far from where Brianna's body was discovered. This knife was very important because it was likely the weapon that had been used to hurt Brianna. The police collected the knife very carefully, putting it in a special bag so that they could analyze it later. The police also collected other pieces of evidence from the scene. They looked for anything that might have been left behind by the person or people who had attacked Brianna. They found some footprints in the mud, which could have been made by the attackers as they ran away. The police took pictures of these footprints and made casts of them so that they could compare them to any shoes they might find later. They also collected samples from the ground, including dirt and leaves, to see if they could find any traces of the attackers. As the police continued their investigation, they called in forensic experts to help them analyze the evidence. These experts examined the knife that was found at the scene. They looked for fingerprints or any traces of DNA that might have been left on the knife. DNA is like a person's unique code, and it can be found in things like blood, hair, and skin cells. If the police could find DNA on the knife, they might be able to figure out who had used it. The forensic experts also looked at Brianna's body to learn more about how she had been attacked. They performed an autopsy, and the autopsy confirmed that Brianna had died from multiple stab wounds. After gathering a lot of evidence and talking to people who might have seen something, the police became more and more certain that the two teenagers, a boy and a girl, were involved in the crime. These teenagers were both 15 years old at the time, which means they were very young, just like Brianna. On February 14, 2023, only a few days after Brianna was murdered, the police decided they had enough evidence to arrest these two teenagers. The arrests were a very important step in the investigation. The police arrested the boy and the girl separately, each in their own homes.
How come I'm a suspect?
How come you're a suspect?
Because I'm the last person that's seen her, is it?
I can explain everything.
No, listen. Right, listen. You Eddie?
Yeah.
Eddie, you're locked up suspicion of murder, alright?
You are under arrest on suspicion of murder.
You don't have to say anything, but you may harm you eventually don't mention when questioned. So you later lie in court, and if you do say we evidence, do you understand?
Yeah.
Unlock these.
Scarlett, listen to what I've got to say.
Yeah.
At this moment.
This was done very carefully because the police wanted to make sure they didn't miss anything important. When the police arrested the teenagers, they also searched their homes for more evidence. They were looking for anything that might connect the teenagers to the crime, like clothing, phones, or any other items that could have been used in the attack or that might show a connection to Brianna. The arrest of these two teenagers shocked many people. It's always surprising and upsetting when such young people are involved in something so serious. People in the community and those who had been following the case closely were eager to find out more about who these teenagers were and why they might have done something so terrible. The media reported the arrests widely, and the story was talked about all over the country.
Police described it as having a thirst for murder. That culminated in this pre-planned attack on Brianna Ghey, which happened on a Saturday afternoon in broad daylight on February the 11th last year. The two teenagers were arrested.
People were wondering who these teenagers were and what their connection to Brianna was. After the arrests, the teenagers were taken to a police station where they were questioned by the police. This process is called an interrogation, and it's when the police ask the suspects questions to try and find out more about what happened. The police wanted to know if the teenagers would admit to being involved in Brianna's murder. And they also wanted to understand why the teenagers might have done it. The police asked a lot of questions and listened carefully to the answers, looking for any signs that the teenagers were telling the truth or lying. While the teenagers were being questioned, the police also continued to look at the evidence they had collected. They wanted to make sure they had a strong case because they knew that bringing charges against the teenagers was a very serious step. After gathering all the evidence and thinking about everything they had learned, the police decided to charge the two teenagers with murder. Charging someone with murder means that the police and the legal system believe that person is responsible for killing someone. And it's a very serious charge. The charges were officially brought against the teenagers a few days after they were arrested. This was a big moment in the case because it meant that the police and the prosecutors, who are the lawyers that represent the government in court, believed they had enough evidence to prove that the teenagers were guilty. The teenagers were charged with murder, which is one of the most serious crimes a person can be accused of. If they were found guilty, they could face very severe punishment, including a long time in prison. After the charges were brought, the legal proceedings began, and what happened during these proceedings will shock you. The trial began in the Crown Court in Manchester on April 22, 2024. The prosecution presented their case first. The key evidence included forensic reports, witness statements, and CCTV footage. Forensic experts testified about the cause of death, confirming that Brianna had been stabbed multiple times, which led to her death. CCTV footage from the park where Brianna was found was crucial. It showed Brianna meeting the two accused shortly before her death. The footage was analyzed by experts who confirmed that it was consistent with the timeline of the incident as described by witnesses. Several witnesses were called to testify. They included people who had seen Brianna in the park before the incident and individuals who knew the accused. Witnesses described seeing Brianna in distress and encountering the accused in the vicinity of the park. Some witnesses testified that they had heard the accused talking about harming someone, though these statements were not directly linked to Brianna. The defense's strategy was to challenge the prosecution's evidence and question the reliability of the witnesses. They argued that the CCTV footage did not prove conclusive evidence linking the accused directly to the crime. The defense also questioned the forensic evidence suggesting that it could be interpreted in various ways. They argued that the witnesses were not credible, claiming that their testimonies were inconsistent or influenced by media coverage. During the trial, the defense presented their own expert witnesses. They included forensic experts who challenged the prosecution's interpretation of the evidence, a character witness who spoke to the personalities and backgrounds of the accused. The defense aimed to present the accused as individuals who were influenced by external factors and not inherently violent. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on the motive behind the crime. They presented evidence suggesting that the accused had a grudge against Brianna, which was corroborated by some of the witnesses. They argued that the brutal nature of the attack indicated a premeditated intent to kill, rather than a spontaneous act of violence. The prosecution's legal argument was based on the premise that the evidence clearly demonstrated the guilt of the accused. They argued that the CCTV footage, forensic evidence, and witness testimonies collectively pointed to the accused as the perpetrators of the crime. The prosecution also emphasized the severity of the crime and the impact it had on the victim's family and the community. The defense's legal strategy was to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury. They argued that the evidence presented was circumstantial and that there was no direct link between the accused and the fatal injuries inflicted on Brianna. The defense also contended that the prosecution had not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused had intended to kill Brianna or had acted with premeditation. After a very lengthy trial, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict on June 15, 2024. The verdict was that both the 15-year-old boy and 15-year-old girl were found guilty of the murder of Brianna Ghey.
Scarlett Jenkinson, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 22 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Eddie Radcliffe, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 20 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand.
The jury's decision was based on the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution, which they found to be convincing. The sentencing phase of the trial took place shortly after the verdict. Both accused were sentenced to life imprisonment with the minimum term set by the judge. The judge considered the brutal nature of the crime, the age of the victims, and the need to ensure that justice was served. The sentencing was met with mixed reactions. The victim's family expressed relief that justice had been served, though they remained deeply affected by the loss of Brianna. The public reaction was also significant, with many expressing their support for the victim and their hope that the case would lead to greater awareness and protection for transgender individuals.
Brianna was an amazing, unique and joyful teenager. I will be forever thankful that I was lucky enough to spend 16 years with her. She taught me so much and gave me so much happiness and love. If there's one piece of advice that I can give to any parent, it would be to hug your children tight and never stop telling them that you love them.
The defense, while disappointed with the verdict, maintained their stance that the trial had been unfair and that the accused had been wrongly convicted. They announced plans to appeal the decision, arguing that there were significant issues with the trial process and the evidence presented. After Brianna Ghey's death, the immediate aftermath was one of shock and grief. Her family, devastated by the loss of their daughter, faced an incredibly difficult time. They were thrust into the public eye due to the high-profile nature of the case, which added another layer of stress to their mourning process. Brianna's family sought to honor her memory and advocate for justice throughout the legal proceedings. They became vocal about the need for greater protection and understanding for transgender individuals, using their platform to speak out against hate and violence. The community in Warrington, where Brianna lived, was deeply affected by her death. Many residents were shocked by the brutality of the crime and felt a sense of loss for a young life taken too soon. Community vigils were held in her memory, where people gathered to express their condolences and solidarity. These gatherings were marked by an outpouring of support and a collective call for change. The local area saw increased activism, with people coming together to raise awareness about transgender issues and to demand greater safety and respect for marginalized groups. The court proceedings, which concluded with the guilty verdicts of the two 15-year-olds involved in Brianna's murder, provided some sense of closure, but did little to lessen the pain felt by those close to her. The sentencing of the accused to life imprisonment with a minimum term was seen by many as a necessary step towards justice, though it did not erase the sorrow or the impact of the crime. Because of Brianna's murder, there has been a noticeable increase in public awareness and dialogue about transgender issues. Advocacy groups and activists used the case to highlight the ongoing struggles of transgender people, particularly focusing on the violence and discrimination they face. This heightened visibility led to calls for policy changes and greater support for transgender individuals. Public discussions often centered around improving legal protections, enhancing support services, and fostering greater acceptance and understanding within society. Government bodies and policymakers responded to the increased awareness by considering new measures aimed at improving safety for transgender people. There were discussions about updating hate crime legislation to ensure that crimes motivated by gender identity were addressed more effectively. Additionally, there was a push for a more comprehensive education and training for law enforcement and public officials to better handle issues related to transgender individuals. Till today, Brianna's legacy continues to inspire advocacy and change, with ongoing efforts to create a safer and more inclusive society for all. Now, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think it will contribute to the ongoing fight for equality? We'd love to see your perspective, so drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more insightful content. See you in the next video.